Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. The U.S. Census reports that the average commute time in the nation was 27.6 minutes in 2019. That's the last year before COVID-19 disrupted lives and changed work and travel. Almost 10% of workers told the census in 2019 that they traveled more than an hour to work. But now companies and governments are asking people to come back to the office, and too often they're doing so by driving alone in the car. There are better ways to travel involving ride sharing and organized commuter programs, such as those provided on and around a corporate campus. But the challenge is organizing those programs and finding participants. Our guest today is Nanci Fitzgerald. She's president and CEO of the Rideshare-company. It's a nonprofit organization that develops ride-sharing services for companies, governments, and residential facilities to reduce the number of solo drivers in and around cities, as well as the emissions associated with commuting and shopping. Founded in the 1980s, the Rideshare Company has created programs that between July 1994 and December 2022 provided more than 20 million trips, eliminating 699 million miles of driving travel. Those programs reduced the cost of maintaining vehicles by $13 million and saved 32.9 million gallons of gas. That prevented 354,475 tons of CO2 emissions. If we can do a better job at organizing shared travel, the potential benefits are vast. So I asked Nanci to join the conversation to find out how we can all do it better. You can learn more about the Rideshare Company at rideshare.com. That's rideshare, one word, no space, no dash, rideshare.com. Welcome to the show, Nanci. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to have you here. You guys have been around for a long time. How did the Rideshare Company get started? Was it an educational effort that turned into a company that organizes rideshare programs?
Well, actually, that's exactly what it was. Back in the late 70s, there were tremendous gas shortages, and the state of Connecticut, then Ella Grasso was the governor, and some of the large corporations, mostly insurance companies, wanted to do something to help employees get to work because you couldn't get gas. You were assigned odd days or even days that you were allowed to go fill up your tank. And if that didn't correspond with your commuting, you were really stuck. There was no alternative. So the Rideshare Company was born, and the first business was to inform commuters alternate ways to get to work. So, really promoting transit, buses, trains, and carpooling. So with carpooling, there was really there was no technology. We developed a newspaper that got passed around in grocery stores and banks and hairdressers and everywhere else that just listed people who were willing to carpool and what their commute was, where they started and where they ended up. And you would, go through the paper and see, oh, this person, has similar commute. I'll call them and see if we can arrange something. And that's kind of how the ride sharing portion was really born, was the Commuter Register. It was just a simple little tabloid paper. And, you basically were, going around and asking people, at the big insurance companies, how do you get to work? Are you willing to do this? And then their name would go into the register, and it was updated, I want to say weekly, so it was quite an effort.
It's hard for a lot of folks to imagine what it was like to coordinate activities pre-internet.
Yeah.
And so you literally were doing the outbound research, calling these companies, asking this information, putting it into a layout and publishing a paper. That is, wow. I mean, how far have we come? Now, you're just the second CEO in the life of the organization and only recently stepped into the role. When you got involved, what were your big goals for the Rideshare Company?
When I came in as vice president of business development, and my charge was to really see where the company could go. Of course, it had evolved from the time where we were providing just information to actually getting involved, what we would call the dirty end of the business, saying that we were going to start van pools. And at the time, early 80s, van pools were something that businesses had for their employees. The large insurance companies all had them. They owned a fleet of vans. They would send out people to pick up people, and it was a nice benefit for employees, but it was very inefficient in terms of sustainability. So these vans often ran, with one or two people. They weren't full all the time. We saw an opportunity to, if we could manage those fleets and not just pick up people associated with one company, but just people who lived and worked in the same place and had the same schedules, we could keep those vans full all the time. So if, we lived next door to each other and you worked at Travelers and I worked at Aetna, we couldn't get on each other's van. But if the way we put it together, you could. And so that began what we called Easy Street. And that was a van pool program that grew to be the third largest in the United States, very successful. And we moved thousands of people every day and had millions of trips that we reduced by having, up to 16 people in a vehicle. And it was a great opportunity.
So how do people connect and get on the program now? You're obviously not publishing a newspaper anymore.
No. So what we would do is there was a lot of different ways for outreach. Of course, eventually with the, birth of the internet and everything else, it became, very easy to find van pool opportunities through the DOT, through the rideshare company, by going, to the websites. But we also did a lot of face-to-face outreach at the big employers, hosting events where people could sign up to, get a van pool. This operated until the mid 2000s, and then we did sell the asset to the largest van pool provider in the country. So that gave us the opportunity to move and do some other things. That still was within our mission of reducing single occupant vehicles. So it really took the genesis of that commuter register and brought it all the way to a program that became so large and so efficient and moved so many people and provided such wonderful environmental impacts that, it's a good story just in itself to kind of look at the whole timeline of Easy Street.
Well, one of the things that I read about and thought was intriguing is that you're also using GPS tracking of the fleets and so forth in order to assemble some information for the employers to show what they're doing in terms of their reduced impact. Has that been really important to the continued growth of the organization?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, because of the sale of Easy Street, we developed a program called Easy Commute, which is an employer-based program. It's an incentive program to provide alternate modes of transportation for employers. There's a couple of different motivations for employers to get involved with this program. Many have limited parking on their campuses. There's just no more room for cars, and they want to reduce the number of vehicles on their campuses. And then also because they'd like to track and improve their environmental impacts. So the program Easy Commute does all that. It's a program where employees sign up. They get an incentive to use any other mode of transportation than driving alone in a vehicle, apart from an electric vehicle. So that's kind of the newest part of the program. Is it was always just can't drive alone. But now that electric vehicles are so accessible, we've been able to adjust our impacts to provide for people who drive in those vehicles, which is nice. But so, they track their trips and they get some type of incentive. This incentive could be a lot of employers give cash incentives. They give time off. So you earn so many minutes per trip and you get an extra couple of days off at the end of the year. So there's a lot of incentive for people to really look at how can I get to work other than using my car by myself. And it's been very successful. It's really a program designed for large employers. But we have now different programs for small and mid-sized employers too, that incorporates parts of that program so that they can use it with a smaller group of people. But we still match trips. We had now matching trips is a whole different story. You put in your, you just type in your, information, and up pops a list of people you could carpool with, or buses you could take, or van pools that might be available, and any type of, transportation options that are there.
Well, that's also facilitated some interesting programs that allow businesses to differentiate by providing some transportation services. Tell us about some of these, I found kind of surprising programs, like what you're doing with the Yard Goats minor league baseball team, or how you're working with the entertainment industry.
Well, the Easy Commute program really seemed to resonate with the entertainment industry on the West Coast. And part of that is because in California, there's a mandate for employers of a certain size to spend a certain dollar amount per employee on ride sharing to help, with the air quality issues. So our program kind of checks a lot of the boxes for that Rule 2202, which allows then the employer to submit their data that they've collected, or that we collect, and we present it to them, and they're no longer have to pay carbon credits if they're not doing a program like ours, which is really beneficial for them. And that's been a very interesting to see how it's developed in California because of Rule 2202. What we do here in Connecticut, we provide vehicles for many of the group home service providers in Connecticut. They are funded by the Department of Developmental Services, and they provide services for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we provide vehicles so that they can ride share with their community to day programs, work sites, medical appointments. And, they not only live in a group home, but now they can commute together to where they have to go, which is really, improves the quality of life for them, which is nice.
And even to a minor league baseball game.
Exactly. And so twice a year, we host an event at the Yard Goats in Hartford, and we invite all of our clients and their clients, and we see all our vehicles pulling up and parking, and bringing all the people in, and they have a great time. And we provide the tickets, and we provide the food. We do fundraising for that so that we can do it. You'll be able to actually do that on our website very soon. Our donation platform will be live on there. And it's a really good thing to donate to, because these people have just such a wonderful time. And it's a night out that they would never, wouldn't have otherwise. And even if they did, they wouldn't have it with all their community with them, which is such a special time to be together.
As you think about that model, have you explored the potential to create those kinds of services around all sorts of destination businesses, which could reach everything, like even Costco, because so many people go there at one time?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done that yet, but what we have looked at is the success of this program, and each year we improve it based on the feedback we get. And so we're at a point now where we've really kind of honed this to kind of a perfect, destination. And I think you make a really good point, because we are at the point where we can say, how can we overlay this onto other places? It doesn't necessarily have to be entertainment. It could be a shopping experience. It could be not an event, but maybe just a destination, like to the beach, or to, another type of a park, or things like that, which would be kind of a fun thing to try and pull off.
But it also occurs to me that as we move towards city centers that are car free, that there are going to be destination services like rideshare that will fit in and enable people to come and go to a walking environment.
Exactly. And I think that's going to be really important, because listen, there's always going to be vehicles on the road, and there's always going to be, places people have to get to, and they can't manage to get there with someone else. But anytime we can move people together, it just is that much better. It takes a trip off those roadways. It takes the emissions out of the air, and it's improving air quality. It's improving, it's helping the government because the roads are just so heavily traveled. Um, you know, each trip makes a difference. It's just incredible the impact it has.
Really interesting. I want to continue this conversation, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And we are back to continue talking with Nanci Fitzgerald. She's president and CEO of the Rideshare-company. They organize rideshare programs. So Nanci, following on the benefits to the companies and the government and using the infrastructure that we have, what gets people excited about participating in ride sharing? Is it the savings, the opportunity to socialize, the environmental benefits, all three?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, it's all three, and it depends, what your reason is for getting involved. Some people get involved because, maybe they're a one-car family, and all of a sudden a spouse has now decided to go to work, and what are we going to do? So they might decide to carpool. One of our rideshare programs is an organized carpool called Easy Green Carpools, and we provide the vehicle and the fuel and so forth. They get in that carpool, and they've got some people who have the same schedule and work in the same place or near them, and all of a sudden now, what was just a matter of convenience and being able to take that job that they wanted is turning into a real social event because people develop these great relationships in ride sharing. And, it could be on a carpool, it could be on the bus, it could be in a van pool, all of a sudden you're with these people in a different environment every day than anything else you do. You don't see them at work, you don't see them at home, but for that period of time, that is typically very stressful if you're by yourself,
Yeah.
is now becoming a very pleasant experience. And so that people do enjoy that. They also enjoy that time, that captive time where you really can't do anything else. Now, all of a sudden, people are doing, they're crocheting and they're knitting and they're reading and they're listening to podcasts and they're, playing games on their phone, or maybe they're paying their bills, or they're, catching up with emails, or, looking at photos of relatives that they didn't have a chance to see. It's just this great time that is like found. We've given up so much time to commuting in our lives, like that is just
Time to
lost.
take it back. Absolutely.
And we can take it back.
Now, do you find that the people who partner in carpools end up extending those relationships to other activities? Does this become kind of a core of their social life?
It does. When we ran the van pools, that was a big part of it, because these people stayed in van pools till they retired. So some people were like in them 15, 16, 17 years, and they got to really know people. I mean, you knew their birthdays, you knew when their kids were getting married, you knew the troubles and the happy times. And all of a sudden they started celebrating those things, and they'd go out after work, or they'd plan a dinner because it's someone's birthday in the carpool, or someone's having a baby, and they all got involved in, making sure they got a little baby shower in the van. I mean, we had all kinds of things that went on. It was really a fun situation. And those relationships have lasted for many years. And I think it's just not something you can experience in any other type of setting. It's a different experience when you're traveling on a, commute to work.
You mentioned a moment ago that you provide the vehicle and the fuel in many cases. Are you also looking at electrifying the fleets that you provide?
Yeah, the thing with electrifying the fleets, it's a long-term plan. I think, the plan I'm working on is for 2035. And although that will probably be here before we know it, but it seems, that there's plenty of time away. And part of the reason for that is because of the type of vehicles we use. We use larger vehicles. We use accessible vehicles that are all, wheelchair accessible. They're not making them yet. They're not making those vehicles yet. And the few that they are making are not at the point where we can use them. The batteries don't travel long enough yet. So there's still some work to be done with the technology. But yes, we would definitely be electrifying the fleet. I couldn't say when it would be 100%, but our goal is to really have a good part of the fleet electrified by 2035.
Now that we're in this era of back to the office after COVID, do you find that companies are also more focused on providing things like ride sharing as a perk or as an incentive to actually get back into the office?
It is definitely a benefit for employees. That's how employers are seeing it. When we are talking to employers about our programs, we are either talking to the facilities people because there's parking issues. We're talking to the HR departments because it's a benefit, or we're talking to the sustainability departments because they want to reduce their carbon footprint. So all of those things are reasons that employers are looking to entice their employees to use other, alternate modes of transportation. Benefits is definitely, we often have been asked to, do presentations for onboarding new employees and getting them involved in the programs and so forth. So, listen, people have a lot of choices where to work. There's, it doesn't matter what industry you're in anymore. There's a lot of choices. And, employers have to be competitive with their benefits and, transportation. It's the underpinning of everything when you really come down to it. And so employees want to know what you're going to do for them.
How did the rise of on-demand rides like Uber and Lyft change the market, or at least change people's awareness of the ability to share an asset like a car?
I'm glad you brought that up because I always like to take the opportunity to explain what the difference is between us and Uber and Lyft. Ride sharing, which we are the original rideshare company. I always say we were green when green was only a color back in the late 70s when we were founded. Ride sharing is sharing a ride in your vehicle. Uber Lyfts, while they're providing a great service, are ride hailing. It is not sharing that ride. You're still getting in a vehicle. It's taxi 2.0, really. It's and it's providing a great service. It's another layer of transportation that we didn't have before because transportation is continually evolving. And what's good about it is that it does provide the opportunity to, have some car pools. There are some Uber pools and Lyft pools where people can do the typical ride sharing because you're going to get in that vehicle with multiple people. But the real basis of it is, to hail a vehicle on demand, which is very different than what we do.
The other thing that occurs to me is that since you have done this for decades as an organization, what advice do you have to other groups that are seeking to share other types of assets, tools or homes or other forms of transportation that we might, what would you tell somebody who's thinking about how to facilitate a sharing economy?
Well, I think, we are in the right smack in the middle of the sharing economy. I think a lot of places have done it well. We obviously do it with transportation, but, home sharing, Airbnb and the Verbos and all of those are very successful. People are, flocking to them. In many cases, more than hotels and motels and so forth. I think that there's an opportunity to share on more levels. And I guess, what I would say is you have to really look at what the asset is that you can provide. I think that people, right away would say, well, I can go, if you're talking about tools, for example, or, equipment, I can go to, Home Depot and rent it. And so you have to look at, really is being able to rent something more convenient than say, let's get our neighbors together and, we can buy a subscription to the, get a lawnmower or a snowblower and we can
Sure.
all share it. But I think there might be something that would make sense there. I think all these things are going to be subscription based. So, if it was a service where you could buy home equipment like that, you'd pay a subscription and then you get the equipment for some fee and be able to share it. I'm not sure what the needs are but I think there's a lot of things that could be done like that.
Do you feel that the intermediary, as the rideshare company is in facilitating the shared rides, is important to whatever you're doing as the guarantor of quality and reliability?
Yes. Yeah, I think so, absolutely, because then what happens is who's going to take care of that equipment, who's
Right.
going to maintain it, who's going to keep it updated. And if you don't have that, because like our service, we are a white glove service, we provide everything. So
Mhm.
you get your vehicle, you get your insurance, your fuel. That vehicle breaks down, we're there 24/7 to not only take care of that vehicle, but to provide you a backup vehicle. We're there for any questions, calls, anything that you need. You've got to have that, because otherwise, when it breaks or it needs maintenance, then it becomes a hassle.
Yeah.
And I should have just bought my own and be done with it. So I think that's very important to the structure of a program like that.
Well, now that we're connected so much more deeply, you don't have to publish a newspaper in order to
Yeah.
connect. It's so much easier, and it really is a time of transition. As you think about achieving your highest goals for the organization over the next 10 years to 2035, how much commuting do you think overall we can transition to ride sharing and other forms of non-personal vehicle transportation? Where can we go?
Well, I think there's so much that can be done. There's a lot being done right now in the medical field, but I think there's much more that can be done. Healthcare is just so important, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. People live longer and longer. My own mom's 100 years old, and healthy. So those people need to get around. They're not driving anymore, and there's need for ride sharing in not only patient to the healthcare, but within the healthcare systems. Our healthcare systems have grown so much and they're so big that there's so much intercampus travel between the staff of these healthcare systems. And that's a big, there's a gap there. There needs to be some type of transportation system so people can easily move around and it doesn't become an obstacle for them to do their jobs, because they've got to get from one place to another and they're losing so much time driving and parking and getting to where they need to be. So I think healthcare is a big opportunity. I think schools are still a big opportunity. Yes, we have a great system of getting kids to school and home. Bus system, great. Ride sharing works beautifully. But what about the kids that go places after school and all of the outside activities that occur? I mean, I've got 4 grandchildren that have like a whole another day after school ends, that are going all different places. And, moms are great at carpooling and pick up, can you pick up my kid and I'll take your kid? But I think it could be organized, and I think it could be done safely where parents trust it. And, it's something that you can rely on and count on, and it makes life a little easier. So I think there's all kinds of things, that can be done.
Well, I think it's an important point that we focus on a particular sector or industry as you're describing, because it gives you the definitions of the problem that you need to solve.
Yeah. I think, for us, one of our next steps is we have really done a really good job at providing the transportation, as I described, to the group homes. And we are now moving that into Rhode Island. That's our next move, because Rhode Island is structured very similar to Connecticut in their programs for adults with the intellectual and developmental disabilities. And Their structure is the same, and I think we can really add value to their programs by bringing the type of transportation we provide to them. So that's how I see us impacting the ride sharing market, is to take what we know how to do so well and let's move it to the next level and next location. And Rhode Island is the next step for us, and we're pretty excited about that.
So if folks want to get a ride, how can they do that with you?
Right now, they can just go on rideshare.com and look at the type of services we have, contact us, and we'll help them get that set up.
Well, Nanci, thanks so much for spending time with us today. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Mitch. I really appreciate the time. It was a really good conversation for me too.
We've been speaking with the rideshare company's Nanci Fitzgerald. You can learn more and perhaps take some inspiration to create your own carpool at rideshare.com. 40 years of ride sharing history demonstrates how the potential for sharing assets like cars and buses has evolved. There are many alternatives to ownership of things that are used only part of the day or even less frequently. A car, for example, one of the most expensive things we buy and pay to maintain, is parked 95% of its lifetime. And if we could use it more efficiently by putting more people in it to maximize the transportation potential of every gallon of gas burned, that can save time and money while reducing environmental damage. As Nanci explained, a clear focus on solving a specific problem, like moving people to and from work or within a campus or a multi-campus organization, such as several hospitals in a healthcare network, is key to making the economics of sharing work. That framework gives you an economic model to build from. For those of you thinking about creating sharing programs for other assets like tools or clothing, or even job sharing arrangements, keep in mind Nanci's point about the intermediary's role as guarantor of delivery and quality. That's the role that makes building a viable company or nonprofit possible. This is a story that's going to keep on giving, so stay tuned. We'll be covering it again. Would you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 420 interviews we've done on sustainability in your ear with your friends, your family, your coworkers? Take a moment, please, to write a review on your favorite podcast platform to help your neighbors find us. You are the amplifier that can spread more ideas to create less waste. Please tell your friends, family, and coworkers that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of their favorite purveyors of podcast goodness. Thanks, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.